The latest on one of the premier signal callers in 2026 was Zac Blackerby of Locked On Auburn. Why? Because Auburn is in the mix. How about that, Zach? I want to start with Landon Duckworth on this question. How badly does Hugh Freeze need this commitment?
That's so interesting because I think it's a lot, but I don't think it's because he's a talented quarterback. I think it's because of what comes with it. A narrative has grown that Auburn is lacking when it comes to recruiting for these top guys. They're getting second, Spencer, for so many of these dudes. And that doesn't really help you. It helps you more now in the transfer portal era than it used to, but that's not what Hugh Freeze is banking on. So, they got Deuce Knight. I don't think it's the biggest deal in the world if Auburn doesn't get, a top quarterback in this class, but they missed out on a few other guys. And now it seems like this is their clear priority. He's very good. He's very athletic. He's an in-state guy. That's been really big for Hugh Freeze and his staff since they've been there winning the state of Alabama. So it's a lot, but I don't know if it's necessarily for all because of him being a good quarterback, if that makes sense.
Yeah, in-state kid, the finalists reportedly are Auburn and South Carolina. Why do you think the Crimson Tide are not in the fold?
I don't think they were ever really in it. I think they've got their guy. So I think that's all that is. His recruitment has been interesting. When you look at Landon Duckworth, South Carolina commit, decommits, and then he had his who's who of visits lined up. And I thought he was going to Ole Miss, Spencer. I thought this had Lane Kiffin written all over it.
So did 24/7. 24/7 had him crystal balled there.
And that's part of it, right? It's like, oh, okay, cool. They know something, and it makes sense when you look at the timing of, I don't know. I thought it was going there. And then he puts out his top two, and it's Auburn and South Carolina. And I don't know how you feel about this. And, I'm not saying Auburn is the favorite or whatever, but it always does make me feel a little bit better when it's Auburn versus a school that he's already decommitted from, because there's no issue with staying committed. I mean, most of these guys stay committed until they flip, and they take their visits while they're committed, to a school. So I do think everything about this commitment, it's been all over, or this recruitment rather, it's been all over the place.
On that question,
sure,
I go back and forth because I think before this year, and this could be some recency bias coming in for me, I would have agreed with you that, you'd rather be the school that he didn't decommit from. Now, this guy who hosts the Oregon Ducks podcast at our network, who I'll admit I bear a striking resemblance to, and he does a good job. He was telling me the other day. And you know what? Okay is fine. There's nothing. Being okay, average means you're better than most.
It is probably the number one Oregon Ducks podcast.
It could be.
I feel pretty confident saying that.
It very well could be. I'd have to do a deep dive, but I think you might be right.
Sure.
But he was pointing out to me the other day that Jared Curtis, the number one quarterback in the class of 26, was once committed to Georgia, decommitted. Oregon got into the fold, went through the entire process, was kind of, not entirely, but was pretty all in with getting him. And then he ended up going back to Georgia. And another Oregon example, Richard Wesley's a five-star edge who famously committed to Oregon by jumping into a pool with Dan Lanning. And then
it was like a week. A week went
17 days. 17 days to be exact from that video. He had reopened his recruitment, but it wasn't a decommitment. But he has long stated that Richard Wesley is likely to wind up going back to Oregon. So I think it can go in either direction. It is where I land, and it depends on the kid. I don't have any data in my head to support the idea that, well, when a kid decommits, he's X percentage less likely to go back if that school winds up in, the final 2 or 3. I think it's more, some kids take their commitments more seriously than others. Some of them are, I want to commit, I'm doing a whole ceremony, I'm doing this and whatnot. And some guys are, I'm verbally committed here. yeah, I'm not committed there anymore, but that's just because I want to look at other schools and, go through the official visit process and not feel like, there's a cloud hanging over my Texas A&M visit because I'm committed to, Oregon or Ohio State or anything like that. So I think with Duckworth, I don't view South Carolina any differently than, anybody else would with regards to the decommitment factor.
Yeah. And I think South Carolina, maybe it's 55% to 45%. I do think South Carolina has a slight edge. I think some of that has to do, I think a lot of it has to do with the quarterback situation that's currently sitting on both of these rosters. So obviously Lenoris Sellers has multiple years left of eligibility at South Carolina if he chooses it. The buzz around him is this is it, and then it's to the NFL. I mean, he's top 5 to top 10 in every NFL mock draft that I've seen, Spencer. I assume you're seeing similar things. But there's always a chance that Lenoris Sellers doesn't take that step, and he's South Carolina starter, for more than just one season from now. But behind Lenoris, you have Aaron Noland, who was a coveted high school quarterback a few years ago. But then when you look at Auburn, it's Deuce Knight. And I've talked to folks. There's a Deuce Knight tax when you talk about Auburn recruiting quarterbacks. And I think that's a big reason why they lost out on Travis Burgess to North Carolina, is because, look, I'm interested in Auburn. I like Auburn. I like these coaching staffs. I believe in what they're building at Auburn. But I'm not crazy. Deuce Knight is there. And so I don't think it's these guys are, afraid to compete or anything like that. But you also have to do what makes sense. And if you're these schools, you've got to ask yourself what the opportunity cost is of, okay, I got to pay potentially 7 figures to have you sit on the bench. Like, does that help? So I think it makes more sense for him to go to South Carolina than it does Auburn right now.
The opportunity cost took me right back to my college economics classes.
Yeah, like economics 101. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's the last time I heard that specific phrase. I did have a thought pop into my head with regards to paying a guy that's not actually playing. When you're moving into a House v. NCAA driven world with a $20.5 million salary cap, not all, but most of which is expected to go to football, I imagine Auburn will fall into that camp where 90% will go to football and men's basketball combined. It'll be probably 75-80% football. But then you have the NIL Go Commission, which is going to get challenged in court. But let's say it gets held up. I don't think you're going to have backup quarterbacks making $2-3 million or $1-2 million just to sit there, because I would suspect that the accounting firm Deloitte's going to look at that and go, that's not fair market value. That's you hoarding a potentially talented player for, your own purposes, when he should be able to go out and get a comparable figure to what you guys would offer somewhere else to where he could go start.
Yeah, I disagree. I don't know how, like you mentioned, it's not going to hold up in court, or at least it's going to be challenged in court.
Yeah.
I also think, if it does go that way, where they say they actually are going to enforce this, I still think these kids are going to get their money. That's just me, because there's going to be talented quarterbacks that go and sit on the bench, and they're not doing that just to be developed. They're doing that because, or they're going to be doing that because I think they're going to be.
Well, I'm not saying I think they're going to do it for free. Backup quarterbacks in the NFL make money because you got to be ready at a moment's notice. You never know when the starter might get injured or something could happen.
I understand.
Or anything like that.
I do think these ridiculous numbers for backup quarterbacks or for future quarterbacks, I don't think it's going anywhere.